In the spring of 2026, social media platform X field tested a new feature. Thanks to advances in AI, with little fanfare, we now seem to have universal translators. And suddenly, the curse of Babel seems to be lifted. Americans, Japanese, Koreans, and other cultures began sharing their love of foods, patriotism, and the stories we love. But for decades already, people around the world have found the wonder of creativity from overseas, particularly Asian nations, with manga, anime, games, and music. Why do we love these stories?
Speculative fiction, like no other genre, reflects the creativity of God.
If you look at the scriptures, you're going to have to see that God uses imagination more than rational discourse.
We are supposed to be image bearers for a vastly creative God.
Reading fantastical fiction opened a portal in my imagination for a place other than just a materialistic world.
I experienced the gospel story with the mind of someone who loved adventure and loved the idea of light conquering darkness.
We're wired for stories that reflect how we see the world in ways that are true.
The story is either pointing to Christ or it's pointing to our need for Christ.
Our universal translators appear to be functioning. This is Fantastical Truth, the podcast from Lorehaven.com, whose mission is to help you escape bad books and explore the best Christian-made fantastical stories for Christ's glory. And I'm Stephen Burnett, native English speaker, host of this podcast, author of Above the Circle of Earth, a sci-fi novel from Enclave Publishing, leading to a series, and I publish Lorehaven.com.
Ohayou gozaimasu. Zachary Rasa desu. Yoroshigo onegai tashimasu. Hello, I'm Zachary Russell. I'm the co-host here, and this is episode 308, Why Do Worldwide Fans Love Japanese and Korean Stories?
Zach, you just hacked, well, it's a legal hack, the YouTube option for automatic vocal translations. I haven't listened to one of our episodes over there on YouTube to see if we both have the same AI-generated voice in Japanese, but now I wonder what it does when you actually do speak some Japanese.
Yeah, so I'm really curious how that just translated. Yeah, so that was my imitation of the AI imitation of my voice in Japanese, but that apparently is how we say Zachary Russell. I do have a nickname that's a little easier for everyone to remember, which is Ozak or Ozaku, which is a brand of chips in Japan that I discovered when I first went there about 20 years ago. Literally, I am Doritos.
Well, a couple of years ago at Realm Makers, I was All Might from My Hero Academia or Boku no Hero Academia. I'm afraid I'm one of those people who thinks he knows a little Japanese just because I've watched some anime. But hey, I watch it sub, not dubbed. And so I do remember All Might's catchphrase, and it's something like this: Mo daijobu, nazate, watashi ga kita, which is to say, what is it now? Don't worry, I am here, or something like that. Yeah, I'm actually here, or something like that. Yeah, My Hero Academia, great stuff. I love that show.
So Naomi is shouting or texting at me from the other room saying, I put everything in the wrong order because in Japan, you put your last name first.
Oh, yeah.
So the correct way is Rasaru Zakari is how I would say it. So there we go.
There we go. We will fix that in post. Real-life universal translators, though, have certainly advanced thanks to AI in particular. We'll talk more about that in a moment. First, however, we've got new reviews at Lorehaven.com, weekly reviews every Friday when we can get them, of the best Christian-made fantasy novels like Perplexity, which we'll hear about in just a moment. That one released just last week. And then we have an upcoming review for a novel called Sanctified. You can subscribe free and get updates in your inbox. Just go to Lorehaven.com. Working on some cool upgrades to the site on the back end, by the way. Subscribing gets you access to the Lorehaven Guild, our Castle in the Cloud on Discord, where you can join monthly book quests with hundreds of fantastical fans for books like this one from our top sponsor, Enclave Publishing. New release, Perplexity from Shauna Schroeder. Assemble the clues, dismantle the danger. Yosarai Patakan, now that sounds a little Japanese there, just a bit, never wanted to finish her schooling in the Indeli capital, but after several months, she is finally finding her footing until her world is shattered by the unthinkable. Facing loss after loss, she struggles to adjust to a new position and new responsibilities, including the repayment of a massive debt, a debt more easily managed if she can qualify for the elite politicosphere on the upcoming placement exam. Some, however, would do anything to prevent J.R.R. from earning one of the coveted positions. Meanwhile, in the northern realm of Egdon, Crown Prince Xander faces an increasingly hostile parliament. Not only are they questioning the necessity of the monarchy, but they are also demanding an accounting of some mysterious expenditures by the former king. Unless Xander can unearth a reasonable explanation, his coronation may be more than postponed, it may be canceled permanently. As old rivalries escalate and hidden threats emerge, both Xander and Yossi must choose their paths wisely before evil eliminates everyone in its way. Enclave Escape presents Perplexity. This is book 2 of the Scepter and the Stylus series by Shauna Schroeder, and Perplexity is now available wherever fantastic books are sold. Ask for Perplexity at your favorite bookseller or your local library, or order it online from Amazon. It is also available as an audiobook from Oasis Audio. And I'll bet you can find Perplexity at this summer's Realm Makers 2026 conference and expo. Zach, I was just chatting with my friend Carrie Neitz, author of Amish Vampires in Space et al., and he was with the Realm Makers event just this past weekend in Cincinnati, talking about science fiction and also fantasy for the homeschool conference there. This is the Realm Makers Conference. They do bookstores at these events often, but this is like the flagship event, in person and virtual, June 24th through 27th at the St. Louis Union Station Hotel. This is a premier gathering for Christian storytellers of fantasy and science fiction. Authors and artists are invited if you're in the industries of graphic novels, gaming, animation, and audio drama, as well as film and TV, because Realm Makers is where you will find your tribe, own your craft, and advance your career. By the way, on a personal note, I can testify. It works. Registration is now open. You can go virtually, yes, but do, if you can, go in person at that Union Station Hotel in St. Louis. They've upgraded. In the past, they had 2.5 full days of training. Now it's 3 full days of training from the pros, plus the Epic Realm Awards costume banquet to celebrate the best novels released last year. Readers, all right, maybe you just do this as a hobby, right? Or maybe just a fan. You too were invited to the expo, and even better, Friday and Saturday, shopping is free. General public gets in. You don't need a ticket unless you want to attend a special session or do a meet and greet with special guests. All info now at realmmakers.com. Obviously, my wife and I are going. Zach is going. We'll be there at the Lorehaven booth and talking about science fiction and all of that. It's going to be great. Realmmakers.com. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually Realm Makers starts attracting an international interest, because great stories, every great story can now, because of technology and changing cultures, become localized. So, Zach, I thought we'd set this up with just a very strong biblical foundation here, in case we haven't heard it recently. Going back to Genesis, an excellent book, foundations of all of our worldviews.
I hear it's a bestseller.
It is a bestseller, and rightfully so, in multiple languages, by the way. There's some great translators out there for the scripture, which tells us that God made people originally to be one human family. It's Genesis 1 through 2. God made it all good. And every single person who ever existed is descended from Adam and Eve. No matter your look, no matter your shape of your face or your hair color, anything like that, everyone shares human blood. It's wonderful. Everyone bears the image of God equally. However, we do have this unfortunate interference by a phenomenon called sin, which broke human relationships and led to global corruption. Don't even know exactly how long. Going to be a few generations there from Genesis 3 through Genesis 6. And that's when God sent a global flood to reboot the world because it had gotten just too evil. So everything gets restarted at square one with Noah and his family. But unfortunately, just a couple chapters later, we have a similar problem all over again. All of the humanity that we see is all together with one purpose: to build a tower called Babel. And in response, God says, that's just a little too much human ambition trying to reach to heaven all by themselves. That's enough of that. So he comes down and confuses their languages. And as a result, people spread across the earth, which is kind of an imitation of what they were supposed to do. But unfortunately, they're now not united. They are divided. And so As a result, we do get these language barriers and culture barriers, some of which are great. I love unique cultures. It's kind of a reflection of idea of having unique families within one human family. And I don't diss other cultures or think that one is better than the other necessarily, but there are some cultures that more closely approximate the biblical worldview and others that do need to catch up. But we see God doing that, not humans doing that. At Pentecost in Acts 1 through 2, when the Holy Spirit comes down and gives the original apostles that gift of speaking in tongues. And obviously, Christians of goodwill disagree on how or whether that works today, but we see it working there miraculously to reach these people who are in Jerusalem for the event with the gospel in their own languages. And it's wonderful to see that. And after that, the book of Acts kind of shows that flaring up again. But then you don't really know whether that goes on now, and Christians can debate it. Skipping forward, though, just a couple millennia, we get a technological means for crossing those language barriers. Obviously, people who study different languages can do that, and we can translate books, and starting with the Bible most of all. But then we get radio and internet, which are shortening these distances between cultures and nations. And that does have one side effect. People can get a little bit information overload and unfortunately feel like all crises across the world are equally important rather than focusing on, the crises close to home. But a great benefit of that is that we are now more permitted to share in one another's stories. And now that we've got the internet, of course, we've had for a while this idea of the auto translate. You can put a phrase into the Google Translate or some other translator and you get kind of the English version of that or vice versa. But now, starting a few years ago, the translations got supercharged. Why? Well, everyone's favorite villain, AI, actually is a hero here. AI-powered universal translators are erasing language barriers. And most recently, we got to see this kind of supercharged all over again because, as I mentioned at the top, the social media platform X, on which Zach and I are both active, activated automatic translation. So now, like, you can see if a Japanese person posts a post, you can see they're translated from Japanese, and yet you are reading English. And there are very few glitches. It is just smooth as butter. And then suddenly we had this phenomenon a few weeks ago as we record of Japanese and Americans bonding on social media over the foods that they love, the foods they would like to try. The Japanese loved American barbecue, and the Americans said, oh, well, if you like that, try putting peanuts in your Coke. And the Japanese went, okay, would it work in sake? So they put it in sake, and then suddenly everyone's figuring this out, that they all love these different things. And the Americans said, hey, try these rice balls. And the Americans said, oh, what if we added this hot sauce to them and barbecued them? And you're seeing this fusion coming up kind of in real time at the popular level. And they're, of course, sharing their love of music and culture, even political alliances. Most recently, the Japanese and the Koreans both were loving them. Some Artemis 2 coverage. We were all joining in that. By the way, yeah, the Koreans are now also involved, and then other languages are getting automatically translated. And so far, Zach, it's been wholesome and humanist in the best possible way, where people are kind of united in their rivalries. Like the Japanese love Japan best of all, the Americans love America best of all. And yet they are loving the other one because they love their own country best of all. What's been your experience, Zach? You've had more exchanges with especially folks from Japan, because now we also see the Japanese Christians coming out, sharing the gospel and rejoicing that they're connecting with brothers and sisters across the oceans.
Yeah, so the very first thing I posted that went kind of viral, but sort of accidentally, there was a Japanese guy that posted about how he came to the US a number of years ago and went to an air show. And at this air show, all of a sudden, a school bus showed up. And he's like, why is there a school bus on a runway for airplanes?
Because America, that's why.
Yeah. And Naomi explained this in even more important detail to me, which is that in Japan, they don't really have school buses for schools. There are the public buses and trains and subways, and school children go on those as young as 5 or 6, but they don't have a bus just for school children. And so already this Japanese tourist was thinking, well, this is unusual because I don't normally see yellow school buses. And by the way, in my day job, we've taken a lot of Japanese students on tours and things, and they're so excited to get on a yellow school bus. And we're like, yeah, it's really not that great of an experience as an adult. But okay, it's interesting. Well, then what happened with this school bus on the runway is that it started going 500 miles an hour because it had jet engines attached to the back of it.
Because America, that's why.
Yeah. It went so fast they had to have parachutes to slow it down. The brakes couldn't even stop it. And this guy said, I think Americans are idiots, but also geniuses.
Correct.
And I saw that and I just laughed and I reposted and said, this is so true and this is hilarious. And a bunch of other people did too. And then the guy was like, I'm worried I'm going to get in trouble with Americans. And then Elon Musk saw this and he reposted this and it got seen like 23 million times. And there on the screenshot was my little, comment.
Yeah, you basically got retweeted by Elon Musk, just about. I mean, as close as we're going to get for now.
Yeah, but the reason that guy's post went so viral is because Americans embrace that identity of, yes, we are idiot geniuses, and we totally own that. Like, we will do the crazy, dumb, but engineering marvel type stuff because America, like, we're going to conquer the West, we're going to conquer space, we're just going to do all this crazy stuff and then figure out why we're going to do it later. Like, we're just going to go out there and do things that no one would dream of just because we can. Japanese culture they're not like that. And so they're kind of fascinated by us. And then we're kind of fascinated by their, weird admiration of that. And so that was kind of the first moment that the translation tool really took off because it was this hilarious observation both ways.
Well, one of the drawbacks, of course, in some of these translations and even localization of anime and songs and such is, I know a lot of people think that they know everything there is to know about a country like Japan because they've seen the pop culture. Whereas if you're actually in Japan, instinctively that the pop culture is just part of who you are as a nation, who you are as an identity. And so you might be able to get a little closer if you actually lived in Japan, which Zach has. So I want to ask him more about his firsthand experience in Chapter 2. First, however, we have our second sponsor, author Lori Christine, who is introducing a new Bible-based middle-grade adventure with a fantastical twist. This is the Dragon Slayer Bible series, which just continued with Book 2, Land of Giants, that released last month. A secret alliance, a dangerous mission, a deadly enemy. Speaking of Genesis, 12-year-old Shem wants one thing, to become a warrior. But his father, Noah, is too busy building a giant ark to train him. Shem is ready to trade his tools for a sword and show the Cobras, the toughest gang in the city, that he's not just some weird kid with a crazy dad. When Shem makes a secret deal with the son of a family rival, he finally gets the training he's always wanted, but something isn't right. Monstrous giants called Nephilites have invaded the land, and the dragon they serve is more dangerous than Shem ever imagined. And if Shem wants to protect his family, he'll have to learn what it really means to be a warrior. Land of Giants is an action-packed biblical adventure perfect for 8 to 12-year-old readers who long to battle dragons, defy giants, and discover the true strength that comes from the king. You can learn more at dragonslayerbible.com or purchase that on Amazon. All the links in the show notes for this episode 308. Zach, I think I just realized that anytime I reference the Nephilim, I'm going to do the Spider-Man black suit theme from Spider-Man 3. Chapter 2. Fans love Japanese manga, anime, music, culture. Now, Zach, you grew up watching some Japanese stuff, and so did I. But first, I want to know about your firsthand experience living in Japan. Why'd you go there, and how long did you stay there?
So Naomi and I met in Asia, in Thailand, actually, when we were there for a missions conference. And she was a missionary in Japan, and I was somewhere else. And I traveled to Japan a couple times to take her on dates and eventually to propose to her. And so I shared about this whole story along with some photos of us from 20 plus years ago. That really took off among Japanese Twitter, and something like 144,000 people saw that.
144,000? Now that's a biblically significant number.
Yes, and there is a part 2 to the story, which was even more fun to talk about. When I proposed to Naomi, it was at this bench outside of her apartment complex in Osaka. And through a little bit of a mix-up with her friend who I asked to take photos and video of us, we didn't get a photo of the moment. I found out later she was actually happy about that because I had really surprised her with this whole trip to come propose to her. And so she just was not ready. And she's just not the type of person that likes a lot of surprises. We didn't get a photo of the moment. We got a photo later and like we had some like post photos. But that actual spot was so special to us. So I wrote about it. Again, I just put it out there for Japanese Twitter and I said, hey, can you help us? Like we didn't get a photo of this bench and I can't even see it on Google Street View because it's kind of tucked away in this little garden area. You know, and then we figured out like the GPS coordinates and then someone went and found it. And just some Japanese person randomly that's like, oh, I live in Osaka. I'm not too far from there. Sure, I'll go take that photo. And it was really interesting because it's exactly the right spot, but it's a different bench now. It's more like this kids playground and exercise kind of bench. We're like, well, isn't that interesting? You know, now that years later we have a family and everything, but also what's really special is that the cherry blossoms are blooming now. I proposed to her in the fall, and so it looked totally different than it looks now, and it's really special for this moment in time. So. If you're in Texas, you know that bluebonnet season is when every family goes out and takes family photos, kid photos, wedding photos, engagement photos, whatever. All kinds of photos are happening in bluebonnet season because it's very short. And then some of the other wildflowers start coming out. Well, Japan very much has that with the cherry blossoms, the sakura, I think is how you say it. And I mean, people will take off from work. They will go on vacations to go travel to these really magical places where the cherry blossoms are just blowing in the wind. And I got a chance a year ago to go to Tokyo for a film festival that our ministry was helping put together. And it was during that same period of time. And so that was the other thing I had shared with folks over there. Like, hey, I've been to your country like recently. I was there years ago. Like, this is such a wonderful time. I wish I could see it, but here's what bluebonnets look like. And they went crazy over these bluebonnet pictures and cows and ranches and all kinds of Texas things. And that really surprised me. I'm like, wow, they really like American culture. Everyone loves a good love story, but just seeing Texas culture and Texas landscapes. And then that just naturally led to all kinds of other stories that we love, like Chuck Norris movies or Arnold Schwarzenegger, or as you said, all the manga and video games and things that Americans love. And so it's just this kind of love fest that's been happening between our two countries. And I've started talking with, I don't know, like 100 different people now. What an amazing time. And everyone has kind of said a similar sentiment of like, oh, it's so great to get a break from the usual horrible news that everyone's arguing about and just exchange kind of these love letters. And it's just so bizarre, Stephen, because as you said, it's no longer copy paste things into Google Translate or Chat GPT or whatever. It's literally you just type it out and then the XAI Grok auto translates it for everyone else into their language and vice versa. And you can just talk normal. Now, something I found with this, which I don't know how this fits into, Genesis or Revelation or whatever, but I noticed that I was talking in a certain way, and I had to stop doing that. Which was, I was talking in the way that I saw Japanese being translated into English, because I thought, well, I want the AI to be able to understand me, so Japan can understand me. And then I was like, maybe I should just try talking normal, even with my Texas kind of slang. And sure enough, it could handle that too. So, that was a whole other little side quest I went on to try to figure out how good is this translation tool anyway. But it's pretty amazing, like how well it understands us. It's a little scary in some ways.
It is. And I've wondered if it was just by virtue of Zach, you and me living in Texas that we were getting the Texas side of that, or if it is true universally that to a lot of the Japanese, at least the selection bias favored Japanese in the X algorithm, they love the Texification version of America more than others. I mean, obviously there's kind of the stereotype of the American action hero. You know, we're all fighter pilots and astronauts and cowboys over here.
Of course.
We all apparently have a barbecue wagon and invite all our friends over to the backyard on the weekends. it's just like imagining that all Japanese are samurai or, magical girls or something,
Right.
But there's a wholesome way to rejoice in those stereotypes when we know that we're just having fun with like the cartoon version of the other. And speaking of cartoon versions, it's only been within the past few years that I've realized that even before I was interested in Japan, Japan was interested in me. And it's unlikely that Lorehaven or my own interest in fantastical stories would have ever appeared on the timeline if it wasn't for a 1980s Japanese anime called Superbook. Now, this isn't the 3D animated version done by CBN, which is more of a production company now and less of a cable station. But back then in the 80s, you had Pat Robertson and others who started a cable station back when you had cable called the Christian Broadcasting Network. And they worked with Tatsunoko Productions to make a Bible anime called Superbook. I mean, it was a time travel, biblical fiction. Regular kids go into the Bible stories, mostly Old Testament, but a few New Testament. And then there was a second series that was a whole lot better animated and basically turned each of the highlights of the Old Testament into its own arc. So you got to spend more time with Joseph and Moses and folks like that. So I still have the Superbook adaptations of that in my head. And then there was also a series called The Flying House, which kind of did that for the New Testament. Some looser adaptations there, and even a little kind of mainline liberal Protestant versions of the story, actually. But what's interesting is that I watched the dub version. I don't even know if there was ever a sub. And the dub artists were all like, I think it was like the entire cast of Kimba the White Lion, which some people think was the hidden inspiration for Disney's The Lion King. So it's all connected. And then I realized later, oh, wait, that was Japanese? That was Japanese the whole time? Well, maybe that's why their mouths move like that, like there's kind of this floppy mouth effect that we all just accept across almost all anime, even the really, the expensive anime. And it makes it maybe a little bit easier to dub. Same thing now. I've more recently gotten into, I love, films by Hayao Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli, Makoto Shinkai, a bunch of others, Your Name, Weathering with You, et al. And a lot of newer anime series. I had an episode about One Piece a month or so ago. That's like my top favorite right now. There's some others, Spy Family, Boku no Hero Academia. There was a first season of adaptation of Anne of Green Gables. That was wonderful.
Oh,
and they only
wow.
stopped 3 books in, but it was really faithful and really wholesome and very well researched. And I mean, obviously it's a speed run through the first 3 Anne novels, but I really hope that they will continue. My wife and I have been rewatching a series as well. Father, what's it called? It's the one with the redhead girl that her father ends up killed. And blast! It just escaped my mind. The title. A lot of these are just really great stories and dealing with East meets West tropes sometimes. And then more recently, Zach, I found the manga version. I thought it was just a manga-ish cover for the translation of the book, but it's an entire manga adaptation of C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew. And Netflix better just pack it up and go home because this is spectacular. Volunteers have added in all the lines from the book in English, and they've just put those in over top of the Japanese speech bubbles, and it's just absolutely majestic. And so I wish we could get that as an official release, but there probably would be some rights issues and such. But manga, especially, before we even talk about anime, manga has just exploded in popularity, and American fans are just loving it. One Piece just last month crossed the barrier of like selling more copies than even Superman, and Superman's been at it since the 1940s, and manga has only been kind of a latecomer here in the US. And so worldwide, one manga title has beat the record set by the Man of Steel.
Yeah, so let me see if I can pronounce this right. And again, I know Naomi's listening, so I'll probably flub this, but it's Nania Koku Monogatari Majutu Sushi no Ai. Something like that. So Magician's Nephew. And yeah, I am 1000% more interested in this than the Netflix whatever adaptation is going to be.
I mean, it's a direct adaptation. Yeah. You open that up and you're like, oh, there's Queen Jadis. That's her. And it turns out that, yes, she was a manga villain all along. The woman who would become the White Witch, spoiler alert, totally a manga villain. I've even gotten to the parts with Aslan creating Narnia, and I'm absolutely loving it. But I've always loved The Magician's Nephew with that little old school sci-fi flair of, the wood between the worlds and the different dimensions and all that. I mean, it's an isekai. It was an isekai before I think isekai was even a label.
Our youngest, our son, he's 9. He really loves graphic novels, and I'm always a little bit uncertain about some of the stuff in bookstores or libraries nowadays. If it's an adaptation of something we already know, like The Hobbit or Wrinkle in Time or upcoming Wingfeather Saga in a few months, sure, those are great. And yeah, if we could get a hold of this, I mean, a physical copy would be great, but this manga Magician's Nephew. But yeah, when it comes to like English translations of manga, I'm usually fine with it because there seems to be, from what I can read and tell, this is not my wheelhouse, but manga is developed in a much wider array of genres than just graphic novels in general, which graphic novels tend to be comic books mostly, some book adaptations, but almost like specialty stories, and the ones that you hear about the most. And especially the whole banned books, hullabaloo stuff. But manga seems to be just all kinds of genres, and even just ordinary stories, like not necessarily a fantastical story. But also, it's the difference that I can tell is that most manga seems to be created by one person or one person with a vision and maybe a small team, whereas a lot of Western graphic novels and comic books are these giant corporations.
Yeah, Superman is owned by DC Comics. He's not owned technically by the descendants of Superman's creators who are long gone. And whereas One Piece is owned, the whole kit and caboodle, by the creator Ichiro Oda. And he's now basically got his entire empire for all the adaptations, the movies, the ongoing anime, the upcoming reboot of the anime, or the remake rather, the One Piece. And of course, the live action series with Netflix. And now you've got Lego sets and video games and everything. It is huge.
Yeah. And I think that is the right model for creative works, because design by committee does not work. And especially when these mega corps are then co-opted by, the globalist villains, I'll just say
the memo allegiance. We need more of these kind of characters, because we're now going to use the story as a means for some kind of social change, which is typically a little different from how most manga and anime tend to see stories.
Yeah, and I think the big corps that own these IP, they're kind of stuck in this. Yeah,
yep.
They're kind of stuck in this like doom loop of like, well, we acquired this or we've invested so much, and it's like this sunk cost fallacy of like, all we can do is just reshuffle things and change this character, change this timeline, change the meaning of this or that. But we're not going to really venture into new stories because we're just going to gobble up everything and just shuffle it around and vomit out something. And it just naturally leads to all these things that corrupt stories, which we don't need to get into. Whereas the Japanese approach is like, hey, I've got this vision for a story. I'm going to make it happen. It'll sink or swim, and then fans will like it or not. And then I'll adjust accordingly. And whereas a lot of just these bureaucratic decisions so much in Western media, it seems impervious to any kind of fan feedback. And, fans are problematic if they don't like something. And there's like this, in Parker J. Cole's recent article about Starfleet Academy, there was some comment that a person left of like, oh, are you guys just anti-SFA, anti-Star Trek, fans? We're like, what? What? We're just
we
normal
didn't like
people. Yeah, we're just normal people. It's not like we own a megacorp that's the anti-Star Trek. Yeah.
Person X, I didn't like the thing. Person Y, oh, so you're saying you didn't like the thing? Person X, yes.
You're right. Like, I'm pretty sure that's allowed. And yeah, so there's this weird war on fans that happens when things are not, when we don't want things shoved down our throats. But Stephen, my main experience with Japanese media has always been video games. So I had the original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Nintendo 64, and then more recently the Nintendo Switch. But man, I was living in these worlds that Japanese creators made, like Final Fantasy or Zelda, or of course all the Mario games, Chrono Trigger, which a lot of people love to talk about nowadays. It's making a comeback, and the music from these games still play in my head. And I'll go on YouTube and I'll find like, rock opera versions or synthwave versions of these songs, and it's just so fun to like keep returning there. And yes, I've replayed some of these games or played them with my kids. The Japanese game industry is they're just hitting home runs all the time. And I think it's this philosophy Nintendo has of your game will only be late once, but it'll be horrible forever if you rush it, essentially. And I'm paraphrasing what the actual quote is. American game studios are just, man, they're not doing well. And I have friends in the game industry and they're hurting. Like they're having a tough time with all this. And again, I think it's just the business model does not seem to be supporting the right types of creativity. And it's just so easily being co-opted. And that's, again, not to mention the whole consultancy business, the Sweet Baby Inc., that whole drama, major AAA titles and studios just getting tanked, just losing billions of dollars. And now Japanese and Korean also game studios are completely taken off and going into orbit. They're killing it. The whole thing is so weird to me, Stephen, because Americans like to talk about how individualistic we are. And we think of Asian countries and they probably think of themselves as more collectivistic. But it's just so opposite when it comes to these media products. It is so collectivistic, bureaucratic, soulless corporations running things here. And it's just these guys creating these things in Japan or Korea and then bringing other people along, but having this very singular vision. I wish I had more time to play games, but I keep seeing some pretty amazing things come out for Switch 2, which I don't have yet. And man, I'd love to dive in some more.
Well, I also love seeing the cross-pollination. The Super Mario Brothers Galaxy movie just took #1 at the box office. Now, a lot of people said that, it's basically just a bunch of, chase sequences strung together. There's not a lot of plot, even less than the first one. But parents of kids and parents who remember when they were kids, they generally don't seem to really care. That's Mario, that's Luigi, that's Yoshi, that's a bunch of characters that I really personally don't have a close personal connection to, but lots of people do. People grew up with Mario, and people grew up with other 90s anime imports like Pokemon or Digimon or Naruto or some of those. A lot of people, of course, remember the classic Toho Godzilla movies, and Godzilla -1 took the Academy Award, I think, Best Visual Effects just a few years ago. And of course, we've had one, I'll talk about that in the next chapter, was one Korean-made movie, Parasite, that also won an Academy Award or two a few years ago. I didn't see it myself. I'm not as familiar with that scene. But I mentioned cross-pollination, and you mentioned, Zach, JRPGs, which, by the way, a FJRPG, Expedition 33, Claire Obscura, just won
French,
Game of the Year. French, yes, but a French studio, Sandfall Interactive, that was kind of doing their own spin on the JRPG formula and breathing new life into it, and yet doing it in a way that apparently was super duper French, and then by the end you got this kind of broken, tragic, kind of happy but not really ending that apparently goes no matter which way you choose in the kind of the final choice, which I will not spoil. And I love it. It's fascinating. Now it's all in English, but you can change the localization, which is even easier with video games. But it is distinctly French. It is made by people who like France, who think France is cool. You can literally unlock, these stereotypical French outfits with the baguettes, and then, optional bosses in a bunch of the world to basically these extremely difficult to defeat mime monsters. It's just, hey, be the Frenchman the American thinks you are, and and there's the meme of, be the American Japan thinks you are. It's fascinating to see yourself or your culture through the lens of another culture's stereotype, and even better when it's affectionate. It's not World War II propaganda where you're the the offensive racist slant-eyed villain or something. It's, hey, Japan likes you, America, or Japan likes, the brawny, super duper, AK-47 wielding American fighter pilot figure, or All Might, this super blonde, American superhero who is actually fighting for Japan. And then in the final season, the fighter jets show up and you get American superheroine and, a bunch of F-55s swirling around. It's super cool. Some people would say it's super based. You get a series we've talked about, like Frieren Beyond Journey's End, which is like the Japan version of the D&D story past the story. And then you get, actually, Zach, a theme that I think I'll close with here. There's a recent the Frieren season 2 had an idea of the heroes going through this land that they really didn't have to go through. They could have taken a ship and sailed around it. But Frieren, the elf mage, wants to go there because her mentor, the human hero, Himmel the hero, loved his home. He loved his home so much. He was so wholesome, a good hero, a little vainglorious, but, Himmel is a true hero. And Himmel decided that he loved his home so much that when he goes on his quest, he wants to also help other people love their homes. And the whole idea was defending other people's homes. And you see that with this good side of the cross-cultural divide here, with people deciding, what, I love my home. I love Japan. I'm Korean. I love Korea. But you know what? I like that Americans like their home best of all. And so there's kind of, it's the best kind of friendly competition here. Now, this could end. We still got the human nature to deal with. And, obviously people loving their homes too much, that they hate other people's homes, is a bad issue. But I don't see that happening, at least with this phenomenon. And you do see these themes, at least what you might call conservative themes, in certain anime, which leads me to also mention that a lot of Christian themes do occur in Japanese-made stories. Now, Japan, infamously, is not a very Christian country. It's like negligible percentages identify as Christian, apparently, and even fewer people are members of a local church in Japan, if you can find one. But at least in Japanese popular culture, you see a lot of shout outs to biblical imagery. They at least seem familiar generally with the Bible as literature. And so, in Rurouni Kenshin, you'll get a subplot that relates around, Christian missionaries. And, Kenshin did this idea of like an abusive religious figure, but also noble Christian missionaries. And that took me by surprise. Or then in One Piece, you get these kind of late-breaking Messiah motifs, and even a character, Bartholomew Kuma, who's identified as a pastor in this fantasy world. Not sure how that works. He's carrying around a Bible with a cross on it. You just have to roll with it because anime. It's fun to see those shout-outs, and yet I do have some hope then for not only cross-pollination of the best of our stories, but sharing opportunities for the gospel. We'll talk about those at the end of the next chapter. I'm going to take that last sponsor slot to briefly talk about the prequel to my sci-fi trilogy. Artemis 2 has splashed down. The Orion capsule, named Integrity by its 4 astronaut crew, splashed down on Friday evening, U.S. Eastern Time, April the 10th. It was fantastic. I hadn't watched a splashdown in a while, so every time the little parachutes just snapped away, I kind of went, whoa, was that supposed to happen? Yes, it was. They landed in the Pacific Ocean, just a few, I think a dozen miles off the coast from San Diego. They got picked up by the boats and the rafts, and now they're all back home, sleeping off the adrenaline, getting used to gravity again. So I was praying them down. Lots of people were. Lots of Japanese people and Korean people and people around the world were too. And you see then this wonderful side to supporting space travel. But my series, starting with Above the Circle of Earth, starts with kind of the darker side of space travel, and the fact that the humanistic utopia in the future might not be a happy place for Christians, especially missionaries who want to go above the circle of Earth and take the gospel into these settled lands. That's the general plot for Above the Circle of Earth, which is now available in all systems from Enclave Publishing. We're also doing a series, so you get to determine what happens next with Brock and Alicia Rivers and the crew aboard the Alpha Omega, going to some dark places for book 2, and some even more intriguing settings for book 3. And that's as much as I can say. You can learn more when I can say it by signing up for updates at estephenburnett.com. Support the space mission, starting with Above the Circle of Earth. Chapter 3. Now we're switching now to that other Asian nation whose pop culture is spread all over the world. Fans love K-dramas and K-pop. Now, I can say some of this secondhand because I've seen my wife's developing fandom for these. And Zach, I think you and Naomi have watched at least one K-drama because a lot of these get into fantasy. And some of these, actually, even more than Japanese media, are informed by, if not biblical tropes, evangelical culture tropes. What's happening there, at least so far as you've seen?
Yeah. So one of the difficulties Naomi and I have had is what rom-coms can we watch with our teenage daughters? Because yeah, we can watch some of the old ones from the 80s and 90s. Those are mostly fine and wholesome. But quite a bit of things that were made in the last 20 years are just simply not appropriate or teach good lessons or are even that good. They're not even that well written. And so one of the things that we discovered were these K-dramas, Korean romantic comedies in particular. One of them is called Crash Landing on You. And I think I mentioned this before in the podcast. It's essentially a Romeo and Juliet story. It's a South Korean woman who accidentally parachutes into North Korea, is met by a North Korean army captain. And it's sort of the enemies to lovers storyline. It goes over multiple seasons. She's stuck in North Korea for quite a while and then has to get back. And then he has to find a way to visit her as they fall more and more in love. But it's really funny too. Like there are just so many hilarious characters in this whole thing. And probably my favorite one, well, there's two. There's Captain Pyo, who's like this real tough as nails guy that's just a real jerk all the time, but he's kind of this lovable jerk. And he's like sort of helping her out. And then there's another guy, and I can't remember the names, but another guy who's a North Korean army soldier. He secretly loves South Korean TV shows, and he constantly quotes them. So it's like very meta at times. And he's like, "Oh, this is the moment where this happens or that happens," and he's.
I'm sure a lot of that's even more meaningful if you're familiar with Korean popular culture from the inside.
Right, and I've talked to some people that are really insiders with this, and they're like, "Oh, he's making a joke that's even better because the actor from that other show is this character in this show," and like, again, there's all the cross pollination between.
Oh, that's always weird when that happens.
Stories.
Yeah, like if someone makes a Star Wars reference in a movie with a Star Wars actor in it.
Yeah. So we started watching this because we're like, oh, this is a really wholesome show. We're not worried about on-screen content or, bad lessons that it teaches our girls. But we stayed for the writing. It is some of the best writing I've ever seen in a television show. I mean, 10 out of 10 with so many episodes. And you don't take my word for it. Look at the IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes scores. It's stellar. It's incredible writing. And again, I'm listening to it in Korean and just reading the English subtitles. I'm sure there's so much more that I'm missing that if you speak Korean, you would understand. But that one show, it got Naomi into watching other shows like it. I've started watching a couple of like Korean sci-fi shows on Netflix, and I've been pretty impressed. Now, you might look at it and say, well, the production quality this, or the CGI that, or the sound design this, like it may not live up to what you hope. But these are certainly not B movies. On the other hand, they're very ambitious, and they're very dedicated to the craft of excellence. And excellence is its own sort of reward in this. And this takes me back to something I was starting to talk about in the previous chapter, which is, I think in a lot of Western culture, and I keep wondering if this is particularly a Protestant thing, because a lot of people might say this. I think we have a view of art that is very reductive. The art must do something. It needs to serve a purpose. It needs to have a mission. And it could be all kinds of different missions or projects that it's a part of. But it really seems like a lot of Asian art is just, it's like an irreducible thing. It's not meant to be anything besides great entertainment and great art. And Stephen, we saw this recently with a quote from Andy Weir, where, and he said this, I think it's a couple different interviews I'm meshing together, but essentially that he does not put any of his own political views, social views, religious views in his stories or talk about them, because he doesn't want the audience to know how he's going to resolve something. Because if they know what his beliefs are, if he blabs them all over social media, then they're going to know how the story is going to end. They're going to assume, oh, the story is going to have to serve that, mission that you have. And look, it's fine to have a mission and everything, but it's when Andy Weir said that, it made me realize that's really unusual nowadays for American creators to have that kind of attitude that I want to put story first. I want to put, entertainment first. Andrew Peterson, though, has also said this. I just read a quote from him earlier today where as he's developing the TV adaptation of the Wingfeather saga, he said, I don't want teachable moments in these episodes. Yeah. I don't want it to be, here's the moral lesson, eat your vegetables, kids. He does want his story to be something that families talk about over the dinner table, but not, I'm going to hit you in the face with it. Because he said he is a pastor's kid and he's very sensitive to that, maybe oversensitive. But we've all kind of seen enough of that, right? And it's come from all aspects, I think, of our culture. It's not, yes, there very much is a cultural revolution happening, and it's happening in all these other countries too. It's this very sinister revolution happening by, again, the globalist agenda, which is not really wanting there to be actual diversity of cultures, but kind of squeeze everyone into the same monoculture. So that's been such a fun thing, is to see these different stories, games, and books in their own context and try to understand it and not really understand it in the same way that they don't really understand all of our stories. And they think we're pretty funny. We're living in an amazing time, like you said, where the Babel curse has been lifted a little bit.
Just a little bit. Zach, you mentioned Andy Weir, and it's fascinating that in my mind, this story, as well as the Artemis 2 mission, as well as Project Hail Mary, are kind of all the same story. Because in addition to fans worldwide, especially in the US, enjoying Japanese and Korean stories, you've got the reverse happening. And so one reason why we may like Japanese and Korean stories is because they will often tribute Western stories. They were loving Project Hail Mary, which has different names in other countries. I think it was called the Star Eaters in another language. I'm sure it's a little difficult to get that Hail Mary pass idea across without bringing to mind direct Catholicism. But then you'll see also in another fandom that I'm somewhat familiar with because of my wife's enjoyments, a lot of K-pop artists, especially like specific Western kind of fantasy. You'll see tributes in particular. There was even a team up recently with the Stray Kids band in Korea with Ryan Reynolds for the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. And they made a song and everything. And the band ATEEZ has this whole like kind of Western-ish dystopian dimension jumping narrative that fans just absolutely love. Like, oh, is this the alternate universe of ATEEZ, or is this the main band? And how are they going to meet each other in the next music video? And oh, what does this symbol mean? And all of that. By the way, ATEEZ has a song called NASA with the line in English, "Shoot for the stars like NASA." And NASA used it for their social media. And I'm told that was a cause of great joy for Korean fans who like NASA and American NASA fans who like Korean music. And you see cross-pollination. Some people have derided this as cultural appropriation, but among those to whom more things are pure, this is a cause for celebration and not offense. Of course, last summer you got K-pop Demon Hunters, which I think especially revealed that idea that there is a little more evangelical influence in Korea than even Japan. And that's why parts of K-pop Demon Hunters, I believe, felt almost kind of Christian. Especially with the idea of fallen demons and human redemption. Like, it kind of gave the impression of being this general Disney, believe in yourself and just do better and then you can win. Well, you could read it that way, but you could also read that as redemption through true light and virtue. Either way, it's fun to see that the gospel is getting these shout outs, witting or unwitting, in fantastical stories and music that are not just English speaking one. And I view that as maybe a little bit of that Pentecost energy. Christians can debate whether or not speaking in tongues happens today or whether it's changed in some way. We might agree that maybe except in rare circumstances, we don't get, universal translators by way of the Holy Spirit. Either it got fulfilled at some point, unrecorded in scripture, or it's now a private prayer language. But now we have replacement tech. We can translate the gospel, not just with, AI powered tools, but with stories. Stories can also get the gospel past those watchful dragons, whether it's the Western style dragon or the Eastern style dragon. And I just pray that even while we're enjoying these stories together that we love across national and cultural barriers, I pray that the Lord will use this phenomenon to spread not only these stories, but the gospel itself across all the lands, so that we will see that reversal of the Babel curse, and so that we will see that fulfillment of the prophecy in the book of Revelation, like chapter 7, verse 9, that says that all tribes and peoples and languages will one day gather to worship our King, Jesus Christ.
Well, to you, our listener, we want to know, what are your favorite fantastical stories from other lands? You can send us a note to podcast@lorehaven.com. Find Lorehaven on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Twitter. Or you can join our Discord server, the Lorehaven Guild. Just sign up at lorehaven.com. Quick comment I just want to reference here. We got a lot of comments on Not the Bee, the non-satire version of the Babylon Bee, a satire website. And a lot of people resonated with our episode about 307, about this, this endless reboot cycle that we find ourselves in, but also, can dead franchises be brought back? And several people have chimed in saying, it'd be nice to just have new stories. Part of the problem is that Disney and other big companies maintain the copyrights for so long that they're stuck in that loop of like having to just recycle the things. And then someone pointed out, look, Psych, Scrubs, and Firefly all got brought back by fans. And so, hey, fans can bring back things, and that's kind of fun. And so, same question to your listener. Is there a franchise that you want to be brought back, and not just one that you want to see die and just be done with? So send us that note, podcast@lorehaven.com.
Restore the Snyderverse. Next on Fantastical Truth, the late Captain Jim Lovell aboard Apollo 8 read Genesis 1 from orbit on Christmas Day. Colonel Buzz Aldrin aboard Apollo 11 took secret communion on the moon. More recently, Captain Butch Wilmore spent time on the International Space Station, and I saw that he's speaking at next month's Teach Them Diligently conference. And more recently than that, Captain Victor Glover aboard Artemis 2 en route to a lunar flyby shared some pre-gospel thoughts about God's wonderful creation of the planet Earth. Why do so many astronauts and faithful staffers at NASA take their biblical beliefs out of this world? It is one world, whether you see it from space or you're living on it. And God has made us eventually to reunite as a human family under the kingship of Jesus Christ. In the meantime, I think we can celebrate our differences, beware of sin, but also love how we love amazing, fantastical stories together. Let's bridge those barriers and love one another, even as Christ has loved and redeemed people from every tribe and people and nation, as we continue to seek and find our Lord and Savior's fantastical truth.